Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju and Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
I think it's time that we focus on the court business because we are 2 weeks away from the start of the NBA regular season. Mm-hmm. And with that said, we're, like I mentioned on last week's show, we're probably not going to go division by division with the NBA because we all know it's really about these conferences, these top 8 teams. So we're going to start out East. What I wanted to do for our listeners is we're only going to focus on the top 8 teams. So Aundre here went out of his way to make us his top 8 playoff teams. So I want him to read them off going from number 8 all the way up to number 1.
Yeah, so I cheated a little bit because I wasn't quite sure, but I think there's quite a few teams here sort of in this number 8 spot. So specifically in the Eastern Conference, right? Vying for that number 8 spot, I've got the Heat, the Magic, and the Pistons.
Okay, so kind of a little bit of a toss-up right there right now. Why don't you go through your list and we'll break it down as we go.
Yeah, so the Heat, they've got Jimmy Butler, right? The Magic were also pretty competitive last year, and the Pistons are also really good. Do you want me to go on through 7, 6, all of that?
Read them all, and we'll kind of break it down after you're done.
All right, so they got number 8. Number 7, I have the Nets. Number 6, I got the Pacers. I'm a little bit messed up. So then I guess, 1 sec, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6, I actually have the Nets. So the Heat, Magic, Piston are sort of my 7/8. 6, I got the Nets. 5, I got the Pacers. 4, I have the Raptors falling from, defending champions down to 4 in the East. Then I got the Celtics, then the Bucks, and then the 76ers.
Okay. So let's talk about kind of like that scrap heap you have at the bottom of the Eastern Conference playoffs for the year. So Heat, Magic, Pistons, so vying for the 7-8 seeds respectively. Now, when I'm breaking down each of these teams, obviously Jimmy Butler going to the Heat, that was their big offseason addition. The Pistons, they added Derrick Rose. They still have a recovering Blake Griffin. And then the Magic were just a scrappy team. They managed to pull down a couple games against, as mentioned, defending champs Raptors in last year's playoffs. With that said, I've always kind of had a soft spot in my heart for Jimmy Buckets. It's something about like that mentality he has. I really enjoy watching on the court. So I actually have the Heat a little bit higher than you. I think that I could see them legitimately finishing as a 5 seed, if not even pushing their way into 4. Maybe something about Pat Riley linking up with someone like Jimmy Butler, someone so aggressive, dominant. I could see that being a little bit of a sneaky team that might compete out there in the East. Not at the championship level because that top tier of teams, I don't see how anyone really beats them out of the East. But don't be surprised if they upset a top 4 team. Specifically, they match up against, pains me to say this, but the Celtics.
I know, those are your boys. So, I definitely think the Heat, I don't want to call them sleepers just because, I have them in the playoff picture, right, for the NBA. But I think you're right. They could be sleepers in the sense that I think most people will project them sort of in this 7 to 8, possibly 6-5 range. I think they're a little bit limited in going as high as actually being a 4 seed. Just because I think the 76ers and Bucks are, another level. The Celtics are still pretty good, right? So you guys got Kemba Walker, who is not as good of an all-star as I think Kyrie Irving, but his personality and the way that he plays, I think fits better with the system that the Celtics have going on. And then the Raptors are still going to be tough, right? They went 8-2 without Leonard during a 10-game stretch last year. Kyle Lowry he's not the greatest all-star that there is, but he's still an all-star. They got still Siakam. So I think those 4 really are going to round out your top 4. And then the Pacers are still pretty good. And they picked up Malcolm Brogdon on the Pacers.
Well, you mentioned Siakam, NMSU alum, so guns up. But with that said, he really has to take a big step for this team to still be a top 4 seed in my mind. I could see the Raptors backsliding all the way to that 6 seed range. And you have the Nets here. So the Nets are a bit of an interesting team. They will not be with Kevin Durant this year. That's already announced. That's a done deal. We will not see Kevin Durant even if this team does make a playoff run. With that said, Kyrie Irving, when it comes to leading his own team, he's not been good. He was not good those first few years out there in Cleveland without LeBron. And then when it came to the Celtics, they were obviously a dysfunctional mess when he was on the court. And even that narrative, are the Celtics better without Kyrie? I thought there was a legitimate case to be made. I got so frustrated watching those last few games against the Bucks last year and watching him turn into Russell Westbrook before my eyes, just missing basic shots. I don't know if this guy has it in him to be the star of a team. And that's why I think Kyrie Irving's chance to succeed is next year when Kevin Durant comes back. This year, I think they've already accepted this as a bit of a wash year. And that's why you have that narrative out there that they might go after a guy like Carmelo Anthony, who we know has been done for at least the last few years.
No, I think you're definitely onto something there, right? Is we've seen that Kyrie on his own is not enough to get a team really, especially to the NBA Finals, but even he's struggled to get into the playoffs, like you said, right? Like with the Cavaliers, he wasn't able to do it on his own. He needed to get LeBron James over there with him, right?
And they were like a 31 team.
Mm-hmm. And I know he hates that narrative, right? Like that's why he wanted to leave from LeBron James's shadow and from Kevin Love, because everybody said, hey, no, LeBron just came back to help Kyrie get there, right? Kyrie was never able to do it himself. So I think you're right. So if there is a team that I do see slipping, I think the Nets. I think the Pacers, though, like I said, will still be tough. So I don't see necessarily the Heat, Magic, or Pistons jumping them so much. But the Nets, I could see the argument for them slipping, even potentially falling to the 9, right? Maybe being a little bit out. But by the time they get Kevin Durant back next year, it'll be a different discussion.
I mean, the Pacers, well-coached, gritty team. Pistons, they have some star power there. Derrick Rose came back to life. You had Blake Griffin, who, again, is still recovering, but he's a legitimate star, albeit a bit of a dinosaur in today's modern NBA based around shooting. Moving off the kind of like the bottom, let's talk about that top tier of guys. So every projection I've seen, this is the 76ers title to lose. And a lot of that is based off their big offseason additions, adding Al Horford there. They did lose Jimmy Buckets, as I mentioned, which I think is going to be a noticeable loss because I'm not buying into this narrative that Ben Simmons can shoot threes now.
Yeah, he made one, and now the NBA and everybody, NBA media is freaking out. Like, Ben Simmons shoots threes. It's like, okay, he shot one of them. Like, calm down, everybody.
He has a better chance of dating another Kardashian than hitting a three in a playoff game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't see Ben Simmons all of a sudden becoming a spot-up three-point shooter and a sniper from downtown.
Yeah, so then when we look at the Bucks this year, do you think that it's going to hurt them legitimately not having a real second star behind Giannis out there? A lot of people are even saying, could Giannis be one of the big free agent names floating around here? And I want to say this next offseason is Giannis's contract coming up. Is that right?
I want to say so. And honestly, like, that's why the Lakers have his younger brother. Like, just being honest, right? Like, the best way to tamper without actually coming out and saying we want Giannis Antetokounmpo is, hey, let's just draft or let's pick up his younger brother and keep him on our team.
That's true. But, like, Giannis definitely got exposed last year in the playoffs because his shooting game, obviously, too, needed some work. But Giannis is we legitimately call him the Greek freak. I was going to call him a freak, but he's legitimately the Greek freak. Anytime you have an MVP, we saw it with LeBron for the longest time in the East. If you have like one unbelievable Hall of Fame caliber star, you can dominate this conference. I love the Celtics, but I wouldn't be surprised if you told me the Celtics got beat in the first round either. I think they're going to be a more cohesive team this year. I think the offense is going to flow better through Kemba than it ever did with Kyrie. But losing Horford to your biggest rival is not something that you're going to be able to easily replace production-wise in the post. Being able to throw Horford on Joel Embiid, which is a lot of this narrative as far as the 76ers' success this year, was the only real stop defense that the Celtics had, and why you can honestly say the Celtics had ownage on the 76ers the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, without that layer of defense, who are you going to throw on Embiid? Seriously. If you're the Celtics, they don't have a legitimate big man. Sure, they got Taco Fall, but as a rookie, someone who isn't necessarily going to have the leverage to face a physical freak like Embiid, I don't see how this is necessarily going to work in their favor. And I'll say this about the 76ers. Their success is going to be based off Joel Embiid, not Ben Simmons.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think any of those takes are too much of a stretch, right? Is the Celtics, I think you guys got, I want to say Enes Kanter too, right?
Kanter, but he's never been known for his defensive prowess. He's always been more of an offensive player, which I don't know if that's necessarily going to mean better things for the Celtics offensively, because Brad Stevens' teams have been built in their defensive game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And so you didn't really get anybody defensively that can replace Al Horford, like you were saying. Taco Fall has the size, but he's also just a little bit slow moving up the court, right? When it's got to transition and get back on defense, he's a little bit slower just because he's so freaking tall. And I just don't know if he's able to compete with the talent level of an Embiid right now.
And you can really only throw him out there for like 10 minutes at a time, if we're being honest.
Yeah, no, 100%, right? And so, yeah, I think this year is sort of the 76ers to lose, right? Like, they're not going up against a LeBron anymore. They're not going up against Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors, which even, like, they look pretty good against Kawhi and the Raptors, right? Like, if it wasn't for that buzzer beater, we might be having a different conversation right now. So I do think that the 76ers are going to need a lot out of Embiid. Embiid had ended up getting sick, I think, last year during the playoffs or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard Shannon Sharp, right? But Shannon Sharp calls him Embiid like a newborn baby because he's sick all the time and throwing up. So, which I think is the most hilarious thing. But if Embiid can stay healthy and can perform at the level that everybody knows he's capable of, I think you're exactly right. That's what's going to really help the 76ers take the East this year.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, if the 76ers don't win it, I think probably the biggest reason why is going to be their head coach, Brett Brown. Mm-hmm. I think that talent-wise, between Embiid, Simmons, Horford, Tobias Harris, they got the guys to throw out there. You know, another big loss that people aren't talking about when it comes to the 76ers, J.J. Redick not being on this roster anymore. Losing that guy, I don't think anyone's going to be able to really replace him. Yeah. Certainly not Ben Simmons.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think that helps Simmons so much is when Simmons starting to drive to the basket, right, everybody knows that, hey, the way to defend Simmons is we start to crowd the lane. So he can just dish it out to a J.J. Redick, who is one of the best three-point shooters that we've seen, right, and probably NBA history. He's not the best, but he's very good. And now you don't have that floor spacing, so you better hope that Simmons has gotten better at shooting. But I think when it comes crunch time, right, guys are going to go back to what they're used to doing, and Simmons is not used to shooting. And so if he does try to shoot in crunch time, I doubt he's going to be extremely accurate and spot on, right? So he's going to go back to driving to the basket and trying to get buckets that way. And so now, who do you have that can space the floor?
Mm-hmm. Do you buy into the narrative at all that the 76ers should move off of one of these guys, trade a Embiid or trade a Simmons?
I mean, it's a little bit difficult. I think they just extended Simmons, if I'm not mistaken.
We've seen contracts extended and then players traded like a day later.
Yeah, we have, but we'll see. And now, going back to our last topic, right, if the salary cap goes down next year, it makes it a little bit harder, though, depending on how big Simmons' extension was, right? That being said, I mean, I think your ceiling does become limited. If you're too locked in on, both of these guys and you're there, sort of like Oklahoma, right? They eventually had to move off of, they moved off of Harden, which a lot of people would argue they made the wrong choice. They should have kept Harden and KD maybe and try to replace Russ as point guard. But I could see if they're not able to do it again this year, starting to really look into, hey, who should we move off of? And I think it would probably be Simmons if they had to choose.
And, I mean, you'll probably love this, but Simmons definitely has some connections over there to a certain gentleman playing out in Los Angeles.
Yeah, which, I mean, I think it would actually work kind of well for us, though.
They play similar style ball, though.
That's the thing. And who would defend the point guard spot, right? Like, a lot of times when people talk about, being the point guard position, it's more than just being able to handle the ball. It's also the defensive half, right? Which I don't think Simmons could defend point guards all that well, just because they're quicker, smaller, and, can move around them a little bit more.
Okay. I think I'm done on the Eastern Conference myself. Obviously, it's the least exciting of the two conferences. We have less star power on any of these teams. We'll see how that bottom half of the conference shakes out, but there's not a single non-playoff team that we have here that I don't agree with or that can sneak into this top 8. No one's going to surprise me that's not in this list you already compiled for us. So with that said, Are you ready to move on?
Yeah, I think so. The only thing that I'll add, right, is, and we sort of touched on it earlier, is there really is sort of the two tiers in this conference, right? Like you have your 76ers, Bucks, Celtics, and I think right now the Raptors, and then the Pacers, Nets, Heat, Magic, Pistons are sort of a second tier, which we know they'll probably make the playoffs, but I don't know if any of those bottom tier guys have a real shot at actually making it to the NBA Finals.
Mhm.
I mean, it'll still be good for their franchise, right, if they make the playoffs and get to the postseason, but I think that's where we could probably leave it.
Yeah.